Good afternoon. This has been one of the most extraordinary days in recent memory for me. To come to an environment like this and sit in a hall like this with people of all ages and all disciplines, fuzzies and techies alike, and hear this kind of convergence of ideas, of hope, of faith in learning and curiosity. It's been extraordinary. So it's an honor to be here, and thank you all. I'm going to talk a little bit about the fuzzy techie divide and a new program we've developed at Stanford called the Senior Reflection that gives seniors in the life sciences like Shelley, who performed so beautifully for us this morning, an opportunity to explore and reflect areas of scientific passion through year-long creative projects. As a student in high school and college in the 1980s, I gravitated toward literature and history and the arts and did everything I possibly could to avoid hard science and anything involving numbers. I had a misguided sense of what those people, meaning scientists, were actually like. I accepted the stereotype of the cold, bloodless, white-frocked scientist and his cousin, the chalk-fingered mathematician, who wouldn't know a Cézanne from a sphinx, I suspected. To me, those hard-minded math and science people lacked the fire and passion that I associated with the arts and with artists and writers, even historians who could bring ancient narratives to life. Over 4 years at Cal, where I did my undergraduate work, I don't think I ever met a physicist or a mathematician or an engineer. Our lives were utterly siloed. Our classrooms were in different areas of the campus. Our social circles were different. I wish Chuck had been in my history department. Where are you, Chuck? And that was my loss. I suffered from this delusion for years until 2009, when I joined a scientific expedition to explore blue holes or submerged caves in the Bahamas. I went as a writer and a diver to cover the story for National Geographic. And on that trip, while hauling scuba tanks through the brush and diving in those unimaginably spectacular caves, I discovered how creative and passionate real scientists can actually be. There were geologists and anthropologists and paleontologists and biologists and even an astrobiologist named Jen McElhatty at Penn who studies microbes in caves to understand what life might be like in the stars. I'd never heard of astrobiology. I mean, how much more poetic can you get? Right. And over the course of that expedition, I scrapped my previous understanding of scientists completely. These scientists were not only brilliant and good with tools, they were a lot of fun, and their level of engagement with the world was as focused and passionate as that of any poet. Over the course of that trip, I came to understand the value of bringing humanists and artists and scientists and engineers together in new ways, in classrooms, in the field, and most importantly, within ourselves. And I realized that we really haven't bridged what C.P. Snow lamented as the two cultures way back in 1959. Soon after my experience in the Bahamas, I met another passionately engaged and creative scientist named Sue McConnell, a neurobiologist at Stanford and a fantastic wildlife and conservation photographer. Together, we had a series of conversations about this challenge, and we designed the Senior Reflection, or TSR, and launched it in 2010. So how does it work? In 3 quarters over the course of a full academic year, students meet each week in small workshop sections, usually about 6 in a group. In fall quarter, they develop ideas, they write proposals, and they line up artistic and scientific mentors. Both are equally important, these 2 threads. Neither is set aside or prioritized. In winter, they do the bulk of their creative work, bringing their evolving projects into workshop for critique and support from their peers. In spring, they wrap up and curate the work and plan for the exhibit at the end of the year. That's a tremendously creative element of its own, the curation. Over the last 3 years, students have illuminated scientific subjects through film and jazz and sculpture and oils and radio and watercolor and fiction and all manner of other media combined in unimaginable ways. For me and Sue, who lead the workshops together, it's been extraordinarily exciting to see our students tackle this challenge of bringing together these seemingly disparate worlds of art and science. Exciting but not easy. Again and again, as Shelley spoke of, the students wrestle with the same dilemma. They express a great hunger to bring art and science together, and a powerful doubt in their ability to bring them together successfully and even safely. There is a sense, spoken and unspoken, that these separate silos of art and science will contaminate each other somehow if brought into direct contact. We seem to be afraid to allow these different aspects of society and ourselves, the creative and the empirical, the techie and the fuzzy, to coexist in the same space in the same project. In a year-long program, there's plenty of time to get lost, and many of them do. And when you get lost, you tend to get scared. You can lose faith in yourself above all. As a writer, I know that experience all too well. In the senior reflection, we actually encourage them to get lost and to keep going and to find their way with the help of their peers. And we're finding, for all of their initial doubts, that they can bring them together beautifully, that art and science do not contaminate one another, but cross-pollinate and interweave and create something new and astounding. There was one evening deep in winter quarter of last year when Shelley presented some of her evolving sand animation to her classmates in workshop, and I asked her permission to share this anecdote. Her piece was in its very early stages. She was learning how to work with the sand, to which she was completely new, and building her light box with her bare hands, and trying different techniques to represent the villagers and the river and the trees. For weeks she had been terrified, and I do not use that word lightly, that it wasn't going to work, that she wasn't going to pull it off. On this particular evening, the workshop had gone very well, and her peers had been hugely supportive of the work. It was stunning, even in those early stages. We knew she was onto something. And she lingered behind after the other students had left, gathering her things at the table, chatting with us. She seemed surprised by our enthusiastic reaction to the piece. As she spoke, she began to smile, and weeks of anxiety and fear and doubt seemed to evaporate before our eyes. It was an evening class, and night had fallen, so she stood illuminated against a huge black window behind her. After close to 30 years of teaching in various ways, in some form or another, I'll never forget this moment. Shelley standing there against that darkness with a smile of exquisite relief blooming on her face that transmuted into joy. You could see the artist and the scientist within her unfold and open to one another. I think I may be able to do this, she said. And so she did, and beautifully. It now gives me great pleasure to introduce Patrick Freeman, a student of this year's Senior Reflection cohort, graduating with a degree in Earth Systems. Patrick is deeply devoted to elephant conservation and has worked with these wondrous animals extensively in the field, and he has composed a spoken word piece that expresses this commitment. Please welcome Patrick and the elephants.
Thank you for having me. I have a couple photos from the time that I spent in the field that I'll play behind me, so it gives you a little bit of an idea of the magic that I see in some of these animals. I grew up watching more elephant documentaries than I can remember, and my parents actually can recall saying, don't you want to watch cartoons? I said, no, I want to learn more about elephants. That's what I want to do. That's been translated into this continuing passion for elephants. I don't know what it is about them. It's so hard for me to explain. They're huge, they're beautiful, and they're intelligent and emotional, and to me that is just so inspiring. So I got to spend the last 2 summers of my college career at a remote water hole in Etosha National Park, Namibia, studying the social lives of this population of elephants. I got to be schooled in the ways of everything ranging from the subtle body language of bull elephants to things like this, a tender caress by a mother to her calf that is very reminiscent of things that I see in humans. Elephants face unprecedented threats today. In today's world, Africa is pretty much a battleground right now for them. We are currently at a population of around 472,000 elephants. That might sound like a lot, But compared to the 5 million elephants that roamed Africa just 60 years ago, it's a paltry sum. They are suffering at the hands of illegal hunting to fuel an ivory trade that has been spurred into action again by a rising demand for carved ivory products, primarily in East Asia, significantly China, where ivory serves as a status of wealth and high status. So I am so incredibly heartbroken over this because I've gotten to know these elephants. All elephants to me are this one big family, and to lose any one of them is a tragedy because they have so much left to teach us. And so I drew on that inspiration when I performed this piece, and I hope that you enjoy it, and I hope that today your eyes shine for the elephants. I have sat at the foot of elephants, found myself the pupil of giants, schooled in the ancient rituals, embedded in the subtle waving of ears, the tender twistings of trunks, the gazes cast warningly over shoulders, and the thunderous mayhem of family reunions. I found rhythms in their rumbles that I didn't know existed, forming words in a language that I will never fully understand. Let them bounce along my ear canals, feel my sternum shudder under the impact of vibrations that hit the ground with the force of small bombs. They're booming. I close my eyes, let the power of this foreign music wash over me, sway with a smile as I hum along with them. Let's go, they say, with slow footfalls of padded feet. Then they're gone, drifting like gray ships into oceans of brush. I held tight to these moments when I read the headline, 35,000 a year, written over a photo of ochre-stained carcasses, their skin stretched tight like old parchment around bullet holes, dismembered trunks tossed carelessly to the side in widening pools of crimson. Tusks gone, only gristle left. The buzz of flies, their eulogy. Their havens are now battlegrounds, molded by the flexing fingers of ivory hunger, reaching from Shanghai showrooms to the savannas of Africa, closing around the triggers on automatic rifles in the hands of men following white gold promises. 35,000 mothers, fathers, sons, and daughters, 35,000 giants reduced to pairs of teeth, hacked from still warm faces at the cost of histories and wisdom no longer passed on, in the caresses of trunks, the waves of ears, or the rhythms of rumbles, but stacked in dusty warehouses as hollow tusks, like old scrolls sealed shut with bloodstains. They're rattling, telling stories that ended too soon. Shipped off to assembly line factories to be carved down to chopsticks, mantelpieces, ornaments, seals, Buddhas, and figures of Jesus. Polished to perfection. Divinity in ivory, only the best quality. It's said that elephants mourn their dead. Stand in solace, holding jawbones close against chests, carefully grasping sun-baked tusks, remembering. But now there are more bones than can be mourned for. Guns outpacing grief. 15 years until only elephant ghosts remain. Their rumbles, distant echoes in quiet forests, haunting reminders that we failed them. Thank you. And please remember, never buy any ivory products. It all comes from an elephant. Thank you very much.